What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and another Outriders video. Now, back in the day in vanilla Outriders, I made a Rocketman build which was sort of like an off-meta build for Technomancers that didn't want to play Firepower Blighted rounds. And in today's meta, now with Worldslayer, essentially we have two camps when it comes to Technomancer, where if you want to have massive fast clears of expeditions and killing huge amounts of enemies at once, there's obviously the Flame Leper Cold Snap setup. We also have another AP build in Triple Turret Techno, which is really good as well at both clearing out trash but also bosses. And last but not least, if you want to go for the old classic sturdy Firepower build, there's of course Firepower Blighted rounds. Now I've brought all of those builds to the channel in the last couple of days or weeks, but it absolutely was a time for us to bring off meta rocket launcher via Tools of Destruction, which is an AP based build, to the channel as well, with all of the nice updates that we now get from Worldslayer. Now, this is of course a AP build for the Technomancer using the Grim Inventor set as mentioned, and in a weird way we kind of play it like a Firepower build, because instead of using Blighted rounds, we are using Tools of Destruction with the rocket launcher, and then essentially trying to keep our stock, our reserve of rockets, full the entire time, so we have access to as much rockets as possible and then consequently as much destruction as possible. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this. First of all, you can use the right combination of mods to increase the amount of rockets that you have available at the start when you activate the skill. And then of course the Grim Inventor set bonus allows you to reload more rockets into those reserves by using something like essentially Pain Launcher. Now the problem we have right now, and this has been identified by People Can Fly, is ever since the previous patch, Grim Inventor actually does not function correctly and does not reload you more than 2 times. Now this is an interesting thing though, because what they mean by 2 times is it essentially means 2 encounters. So you can very easily test this. You can create the build exactly like this, go into an expedition, and your first 2 fights, whether it's groups of enemies or a boss or anything like that, you're going to be able to indefinitely reload your Tools of Destruction by just hitting stuff with Pain Launcher. But once you get past 2 fights, then it'll just suddenly stop working, and you'll actually have to use up the rockets that you have in Tools of Destruction and then wait for the cooldown to reactivate it to get more rockets back again. Now this is something that People Can Fly are looking at, and they are going to fix this. So at the very least right now the build is not as great as it can be, but eventually when they fix this with the next patch round, according to what we saw on Reddit, this will actually bring the build into a much better state than it is right now. Regardless, because like for instance the Arbiter is considered as one fight, you can indefinitely reload your rockets on the Arbiter, as you saw in the gameplay in the background right now. And that means that you can actually, by managing your ammo correctly and managing your cooldown on Pain Launcher correctly, you can make sure that you actually have enough rockets to finish that fight and kill him. Now, I definitely think that this boss can kill, and as you can see with the video evidence there, obviously you can kill the Arbiter. But I would say that recently we've seen that some builds are more suited to killing the Arbiter than they are to fast clearing expeditions. Other ones are better suited to fast clearing expeditions and not so much killing bosses. And then on a rare occasion you can identify builds that are reasonably good at both of those things, and those are really like the meta, the genre defining builds. I would definitely put this build into the category of being better at completing expeditions. The problem usually with Tools of Destruction is the fact that it's not as versatile at dealing damage to enemies that are behind cover or anything like that. And something that I've recently realized with Scorched Zealot and its projectile is that for instance can actually shoot stuff out from behind cover and everything like that, whereas Tools of Destruction, the rocket launcher, you kind of have to be like super accurate if you want to hit stuff, because the splash damage can sometimes bug out and not actually deal the damage correctly. So when it then comes to the actual build itself, as always, please do ignore my transmog. This is using the Grim Inventor set for the Technomancer. We'll talk about weapons first, then we'll look at armor and the mods on that armor. We'll talk about the skills and the rotation that you should be using. We'll look at the class tree, we'll look at the PAX points and where you should be putting them, and then I'll also give you some pointers as to what you should target first with your ascension points. Now for the weapon itself, as mentioned, you are essentially trying to use tools of destruction the entire time, so you don't need a good secondary weapon, you don't need a pistol, anything like that. Of course, if you want to carry something that is like, for instance, the reload meta with radiation splash, moaning winds, and clip combustion like I have on the Skeleton, that can be something that you can use in the times that maybe you're waiting for the rocket launcher to reload to happen due to the fact that you've lost your ammo from Grim Inventor not working. Once Grim Inventor works correctly with the patch that they're going to bring out, then that's going to mean that you even need a secondary set of weapons even less, because the point is you will basically have access to the rocket launcher the entire time, and that's where your damage comes from. Now for the primary weapon that I carry, this is actually a purple weapon that I found which has armor pierce on, which I really think is important for this, especially if you are stacking through the whole armor pierce to resistance pierce to AP, because the point is this is an AP build and we want to have access to as much AP as possible, because that is going to influence the damage of the rocket launcher. So this has first things first on here, which gives me even more armor piercing, and it has Deuteronome on it, which says that when 2 of my skills are on cooldown, I receive a firepower bonus, otherwise I get a flat anomaly bonus. So again, just a way for us to really push up that anomaly power. Last but not least, I have anomaly enhancement on here, which then says that I get a passive 40% firepower boost, which is based on the total value of my anomaly power. So that's how you can see that my firepower is 1.5 million and my anomaly power is 2.5 million, which means that when I actually do have a problem with not having access to rockets, my weapons can deal a fair bit of damage and I can sort of get myself out of trouble. Now when it comes to the actual set itself, as mentioned, 3 pieces of Grim Inventor is what you're looking for at a bare minimum. I'm actually using 4. And when we talk about the set bonus here, this says that as long as Tools of Destruction is active, a confirmed hit with Pain Launcher refills 40% of your ammunition for both miniguns and RPGs. Now, what's important to notice here is that it says a confirmed hit with Pain Launcher refills 40% of your ammunition. If 2 of your rockets from Pain Launcher hit, it's equal to 80%. If 3 of the rockets hit, then it's 120. So the point is that by hitting a cluster of enemies, you can always make sure that you have like your entire magazine back. Now, this is relatively important because it means that you need to probably stack a bunch of mods into Pain Launcher as well, which also makes it more effective at healing more enemies, dealing more damage. And as you saw in the footage at the beginning of this video, Pain Launcher actually starts picking up a lot of, the slack of the build and actually dealing a fair amount of damage as well, which is phenomenal. Now, on the Grim Inventor mask here, we have, again, like I said, we want to be stacking as much anomaly power as we can, and then secondary, we want to be getting as much status as we can. Absolutely, having a weapon with armor piercing and status on it would be goated here. That would definitely be something that you should be looking for. So basically, an Heir to the Desert with the right configuration of mods on there could be really good here, because that has, of course, armor pierce and it has status on it, which is lovely. Nonetheless, we want to get as much status as we can on our actual armor pieces alongside anomaly power, and then a fair combination of cooldown reduction and maybe some additional, I would say, skills. Life leech is probably not a bad idea, just to give you a little bit of additional life back, but absolutely prioritize status power as much as you can, because that's actually directly going to influence your damage as well, especially once we get to the packs tree. Now we have Rocket Man on here, which increases our stock of available rockets the minute we activate Tool of Destruction by 3 additional rockets, which is great. We also have Bang for Your Buck on here, which says that activating the skill grants 100% base ammo. So it doubles up your ammo and it gives you 3 additional. So this is just gets you to the maximum amount of rockets that you can get with this particular configuration of 11. So once you activate Tool of Destruction, you have 11 rockets ready to go. Anomaly Echo is quite good on this build because we are going to be activating Cold Snap and Pain Launcher all the time. This gives us a nice firepower and anomaly power increase on skill activation for 6 seconds. We'll be using those skills a lot, so we can pretty much have this buff up at all times. On the chest piece itself, I have Cannonade on here, which just increases the amount of rockets that Pain Launcher shoots by 10, which is a shitload, so that's good. We have no resistance against the fortified here because, as mentioned, we want to be changing our armor piercing, some of it into resistance piercing, and then our resistance piercing gets changed into AP, which gives us an additional, a lot of additional damage, because of course our AP drives the damage of the rocket launcher. Captain Antonia is good as well, because while you'll have no problem blowing up smaller enemies, your captains, elites, and bosses are where you're going to need a little bit of additional, help, and this absolutely does that. On the pants here, we have special delivery, which says that it increases the rocket's explosive radius by 33%. So it means the splash damage that comes from a hit with the rocket launcher covers more area, which is really good. And then Demolition Man on here is super clutch, because it actually increases each rocket's damage by a flat amount. In my case here, 2.2 million, which is huge. If you don't have this mod, you will notice that you're not hitting as hard as you really want to, so absolutely make sure to get Demolition Man. Shatter is on here because we have Cold Snap, and this essentially freezes enemies down, and this just means that if we cold snap enemies and we hit them with the rocket, then we're going to be dealing 16% of additional damage, which is phenomenal. On the gloves themselves, I have advanced rockets on here, which says that every rocket from Pain Launcher deals additional damage as well. Now, Pain Launcher shoots this massive volley of rockets, so having each one of those deal 250k damage more is a huge damage buff to this skill, and this skill has no problem with wiping out entire groups of enemies if you position it correctly and have the majority of the volley hitting them. A Euthanizer on here also, just like Shatter, gives us additional damage to Frozen. Euthanizer gives us additional damage to Toxic, and almost all of our skills cause Toxic as well, because we are using lethal devices. So when we look at the packs tree just now, you'll see what I mean, but that means that we'll be getting this flat damage increase to those enemies as well. Now, Freeze Barrage on here is kind of like a free, I would say, mod, and you could potentially change this to something else, maybe something that, like Icicle Storm, that benefits Cold Snap more or something like that. But for now, what this does is that each rocket that explodes from Pain Launcher also freezes enemies. So if I don't have access to a Cold Snap, this is another way for me to freeze enemies. And of course, once enemies are frozen, we deal more damage to them, which is also good. Plus, frozen enemies aren't going to be dealing any damage to you. So then when we get over to the boots, the last one here, this says bigger sector. So now it says that Pain Launchers launch rockets cover 45% more area. What this means is that it's essentially it just hits in a wider sort of like line, which is really good, because it means that you don't have to be as accurate to be able to get those enemies hit. Now, Unstoppable Force is the other part of the combo, as mentioned. So using this and what's his name over here, no resistance against the fortified, is how we change armor pierce to resistance pierce, and then consequently AP. Now we also have increased range on here, which means that the Pain Launcher is also just going to be able to hit further. And in the footage that you saw at the beginning of the video, you saw this Pain Launcher was essentially firing from one side, where you deploy it all the way to the back end of an arena. So it's a fantastic way for you to get as much juice out of that skill as you can, because it'll just go much further. Now, when we come over to the skills itself, as mentioned, we are using Cold Snap, Pain Launcher, and Tool of Destruction. And specifically with Tool of Destruction, we are always prioritizing the rocket launcher. We don't use the minigun. Now, what you want to be doing is you want to enter a fight and, pop the Tools of Destruction. Now you've got your rocket launcher. While you have your rocket launcher out, you can still Cold Snap and you can still Pain Launcher. You use Cold Snap to keep the enemies at bay, keep them far away from you, essentially make them, toxic by hitting them with lethal devices, empowered Cold Snap. And then you use Pain Launcher to hit clusters of enemies. And when you get low on ammo on your Tools of Destruction, you use Pain Launcher to refill yourself back up. Now, when it comes to the class tree itself, because AP benefits us the most when it comes to additional damage on this build, we absolutely want to be going bottom tree. Plus, we also want to be getting to Tech Bond, which says that when we activate an ordnance skill, it increases our anomaly power by 50%. Now, this means on the first activation of Tools of Destruction, but then consequently, we can also just keep proccing this by using the Pain Launcher. That will also give us this buff. But nonetheless, first and foremost, we kind of just go here, get ourselves a little bit of additional HP, we get some cooldown reduction here. We absolutely get Exposing Toxin and its sister node, which then means that whenever an enemy has the toxic status on them, which is pretty much all the time because of lethal devices, they also get vulnerable on them. And this then marked for execution means that vulnerable is also 40% more effective. Then we go down here, we actually pick up both these nodes because we get some cooldown reduction here and we get some resistance piercing, which gives us more AP. And then we continue on going here, we grab ourselves a little bit of survivability, we get some more anomaly power here, we get ourselves Wipeout here, which is just a way for us to deal more damage once an enemy only has 30% HP left, which is a good thing because that means our ticks from our toxic will hit for more. Plus, when we're fighting a boss, it means that last little bit of the boss's life, you'll go through it a lot quicker. get ourselves some more cooldown reduction here, and we just keep getting anomaly power until we get to team play here, which says that this decreases elite's damage against you and your teammates by 10%, so that's some good damage mitigation here. And then, as mentioned, we absolutely get tech bond because this is just a nice ramp up to our anomaly power here. Then when it comes to the packs tree, this actually goes through lethal devices, but we end up at depleted core because this is especially made for tools of destruction builds. But starting out, we get ourselves initial striker, which means that activating skills increases our anomaly power or firepower by 10%, depending on which one is higher. Our anomaly power will absolutely be higher, so we'll get the bonus to that. We get lethal devices because this says that our ordnance and gadget skills inflict toxic whenever you hit them. So if you hit a bunch of enemies with cold snap, not only will they be frozen, they'll also get toxic on them. Likewise, if you shoot them with rockets, those rockets will also, inflict toxic on enemies, which means when you are in a fight, hitting stuff a second time means that you benefit from that increased damage to toxic. Likewise, last but surely not least, your rockets will also, deal all that additional damage with pain launcher, because they will also, inflict toxic on the enemies. And because we have that mod on there, they will also inflict freeze. So again, a great way for us to lock down the battlefield. We get painkiller here, kind of because we have to. Painkiller is not great. It just gives us a little bit of additional health regeneration whenever we damage an enemy. So some damage mitigation there. We get break their ranks, which says that your interrupt skills remove effect resistance from hit elites, 7-second cooldown. Your interrupt skills here are your tools of destruction, your rockets, but it's also your pain launcher, so you can proc this quite easily. But break the ranks is really not that great. The reason why we take it is because we want to get to depleted core. Now, depleted core says that your ordnance skills damage is increased by 100% of your status power, and this is where a lot of that additional damage that comes to rockets comes from. So the more status power you stack into your build, the more impressive those rockets are going to be. Last but not least, the Ascension tree. Absolutely, your first 10 points should be going into anomaly damage, and from then on, you should be looking at dipping into resistance pierce and armor pierce, which is just going to drive your AP up even more. Of course, you want to be getting anomaly power, 10% additional here for just that flat increase there as well. You can absolutely get yourself some cooldown reduction, which is phenomenal on this build, especially in the kind of like broken state that it is right now until Grim Inventor is corrected, because you will eventually run out of rockets and then you'll have to wait for an actual cooldown, and that needs to happen so that you can get your next amount of rockets from tools of destruction. So wanting to stack your cooldown reduction as much as possible so you get those rockets back quicker should be a priority. Absolutely get yourself some additional damage against elites, but also less damage from elites. And then if you're struggling with survivability, it's always a good idea to perhaps pick yourself up some additional health here and some additional armor. But I will say though that this build kind of plays super safe due to the fact that you have Cold Snap, which is a excellent skill for keeping enemies at bay and not letting them put too much pressure on you. And then due to the fact that the rockets, which you'll be shooting with tools of destruction, dealing a shitload of damage, you should be able to finish off enemies quite easily. That gets us to the end of the build and the video. Let me know if you have been trying out tools of destruction. I know that minigun tools of destruction is quite popular as well, and you can absolutely look forward to be making a minigun centric version of this build as well as soon as I've farmed out the right pieces and all of that. But let me know what you would change with this build, how you would improve this, if this is something that you're interested in giving it a try. And last but not least, let me know which other Technomancer builds you might want to have a peek at and you might want to have me do a video on or do some kind of coverage on. I think I've gotten pretty close to all of the Technomancer builds that I want to highlight. And that means that once I do, I think, the minigun one still, then we'll probably move on to some of the other characters and bring them up to speed with the latest patch that we had and the changes that of course came with that. But again, thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. It's just super important to me that you have a great morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.